Indiana Fever handle business the way you are supposed to when you are playing against a team that does not belong on the floor with you. When they don't belong out there, you are supposed to beat the hell out of them. And that's what Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever did to Nigeria.
Let me set the scene for you. It is a Tuesday night in Indianapolis, Indiana. Gainbridge Fieldhouse is buzzing with the particular energy of a crowd that has been waiting not just for a preseason basketball game, but for an answer. A very specific answer to a very specific question that has been haunting Indiana Fever fans, analysts, front office executives, and honestly the entire WNBA ecosystem for the better part of 3 weeks. The question was simple but heavy. Is she back? Not just back in the sense of lacing up sneakers and checking into a basketball game, but back in the truest, most complete sense of the word. Back the way she was before the ankle scare in Dallas that sent a shockwave of anxiety through an entire fan base. Back the way she was before the conservative load management philosophy that had Stephanie White carefully rationing her minutes like a precious, irreplaceable resource. Back the way she was before the rust of early preseason made her look like a player still trying to find herself inside a professional system. The question was whether Iowa Caitlin, capital I, capital C, was back. And tonight, against the Nigerian national team, in front of a home crowd that desperately needed to believe, the answer arrived not as a whisper, not as a cautious, guarded maybe, but as a thunderclap so loud the entire league had to stop and pay attention. She is back. Iowa Caitlin is completely, undeniably, terrifyingly back. Now, before we get into the granular details, and we are going to get very granular on this channel, because that is what Simply Explained is built for. Let me give you a framework for understanding what Iowa Caitlin actually means. Because if you are newer to following her career, that phrase carries enormous weight. When people talk about Iowa Caitlin, they are talking about the most dominant, electrifying, statistically absurd version of Caitlin Clark that has ever existed on a basketball floor. They are talking about the player who, over the course of 4 seasons at the University of Iowa, shattered virtually every major scoring record in the entire history of NCAA basketball, men's or women's. Not just women's basketball. All of college basketball. They are talking about the version of Caitlin Clark who would catch the ball at half court, look up at the rim from 35 feet away, and simply decide to shoot because she felt like it, and then watch it go in. The version who threw no-look passes over her shoulder in transition that landed perfectly in a teammate's hands, as if she had eyes in the back of her skull. The version who grinned while doing all of it, who played with a joy and a freedom and a confidence that was genuinely contagious. A player who made millions of people fall in love with women's basketball because she made it look like the most fun sport in the world to play. That Caitlin Clark. That exact version. She showed up tonight in Indianapolis, and the Nigerian national team had absolutely no answer for her. Let us talk about what actually happened on the court, because the numbers deserve to be spoken out loud. In 12 minutes and 48 seconds of actual playing time, less than 13 minutes, Caitlin Clark went 3 for 4 from the field, 2 for 3 from beyond the three-point arc, and finished with 12 points, 4 assists, 1 steal, and a plus-minus rating of positive 12, meaning, in the time she was on the floor, the Indiana Fever outscored Nigeria by 12 points. All of that in under 13 minutes before head coach Stephanie White made the entirely correct decision to sit her down because the game was already over. Now, some of you might look at those numbers and think, fine, it was Nigeria. It was a preseason game. It doesn't mean anything. And I want to address that perspective directly. Because here at Simply Explained, we do not dismiss context, but we also do not hide from what the data is actually telling us. Yes, it was Nigeria. Yes, it was a preseason game. But here is why those numbers matter far beyond the opponent's name on the scoreboard. Look at the trajectory. In Caitlin Clark's very first preseason appearance against the New York Liberty, she shot 2 for 10 from the field, 2 of 10. Rust was visible. The mechanics were finding themselves. The timing was slightly off. Fine. That happens. That is what preseason is for. Then came the Dallas game. She went 4 for 6, 21 points, looking dramatically sharper. The rust was clearly burning off. The efficiency numbers jumped. But the team around her collapsed when she went to the bench, and the Fever lost. The win column outcome masked what was a genuinely encouraging individual performance from Clark. And now tonight, 3 for 4, 75% shooting, 57% from three-point range over the last 2 games combined, 7 for 10 from the field across those 2 games. 70% shooting percentage from a player who shot 27% from three-point range last season. That last number deserves its own paragraph because it is the single most important data point in this entire preseason story.
Okay, I get hit in the face. Pardon. I get hit in the face. You know what I do? Drain a 3. Bang, right there in your face. Right there in your face. Call the first foul, ref. Call the first foul, and that girl wouldn't have got her brains busted like that from 30. Okay, if you would have called the foul and not made her mad, that girl wouldn't have got embarrassed out there. Caitlin Clark put on a show, man. The MVP season is loading. Make no mistake about it.
27% from three-point range last season was not just a bad number. It was an alarming number. It was the kind of number that gives opposing defensive coordinators a blueprint. When Caitlin Clark's three-point shot is broken, you can sag off her, you can give her the pull-up, and you can load up to stop her driving lanes and her passing angles. You can take away the gravity that makes her entire offensive game function. 27% from 3 is a weakness you can actually game plan against at the professional level. But 57% from 3 over the last 2 games? That is a completely different player. That is a Caitlin Clark who spent the entire offseason with her shooting coach Brandon Payne rebuilding her mechanics from the ground up, and those mechanics are now showing up in live action against real WNBA-level defenders. That is not a small thing. That is potentially a franchise-altering development. Because a Caitlin Clark shooting 40% or better from three-point range in the regular season is not just an improved player. She becomes arguably the single most unstoppable offensive force in the history of women's professional basketball.
Right there. Get it. That's it. She could have passed it to Shatori Walker.
Checking in for Nigeria.
That's what I'm talking about right there. Get it.
Yeah. It's gonna be a long season for some people, man. It's gonna be a really, really long season for a lot of people, especially when Caitlin is cooking the way she been cooking. Pardon. When Caitlin been cooking the way she's cooking, it's going to be a long season for a lot of people. Now, I'm going to be honest. This is Ty Harris's return game. I'm good. No disrespect, mama. No disrespect, mama.
But here is where I want to slow down and tell you what the mainstream media completely missed about tonight's game. Because while everyone was watching Caitlin Clark, something equally important was happening on the other side of the rotation. And it has massive implications for how we should evaluate this team's championship ceiling. 5 days ago, in the loss against Dallas, the Indiana Fever were outscored 36-7 in the second quarter, 36-7, in 1 quarter of basketball. And the most painful part of that collapse was the timing. It happened the moment Clark went to the bench for a routine rest. The minute she sat down, the offense died, the floor spacing collapsed, the pick-and-roll action stopped working. The bench unit could not generate consistent offense, could not defend at a high enough level, and could not stem the bleeding fast enough to keep the game within reach. It was a visceral, undeniable exposure of a depth problem that every honest Fever observer had been quietly worrying about. So tonight, the real test was not whether Caitlin Clark would look good. We suspected she was getting better. The real test was whether the supporting cast around her had grown enough to not completely fall apart the moment she left the floor. And the answer tonight was a resounding, wall-shaking yes. Shatori Walker-Kimbrough logged 5 points in 19 minutes with a +17 rating. Think about that, a positive 17-point differential in less than 20 minutes of action against a team that, yes, was outmatched, but you still have to play the game. Jessica Timmons posted 3 points and a positive 11 rating. Megan McConnell, who has been one of the quiet revelations of this entire preseason, had a positive 11 rating with 3 steals and 3 assists in under 12 minutes of floor time. 3 steals, 3 assists, 11 plus-minus in 12 minutes. That is an absolutely elite efficiency line for a bench player. The Fever did not just survive without Clark on the floor. They extended the lead. They pushed the pace. They hit shots from the perimeter. They locked down defensively. They played exactly the way a deep, confident, well-coached roster is supposed to play when the star is getting a rest. The bench was not a liability tonight. The bench was a weapon. And that distinction between a team that can only function when its star is playing and a team that can maintain and extend advantages regardless of the rotation is exactly the difference between a good team and a genuine championship contender. Now let us talk about the biggest headline from tonight that has nothing to do with Caitlin Clark directly, because this development might actually be more important in terms of understanding what this Indiana Fever team is capable of at full strength. Aaliyah Boston is back. For anyone who has been following the Fever closely this preseason, Boston's absence from the first 2 games due to a lower leg injury suffered during the unrivaled league was not just a minor inconvenience, it was a structural emergency. Because when you watch Indiana Fever basketball, and you try to understand how their offensive system actually functions, how the spacing works, how the pick and roll generates advantages, how the ball moves from the perimeter to the paint and back out again, Aaliyah Boston is the connective tissue that holds all of it together. She is not just a scorer. She is not just a rebounder, though she is excellent at both. She is the intelligent, instinctive hub that makes the entire machine run. She finds cutters diving to the rim before they know they are cutting. She sets screens that free Kelsey Mitchell from defenders with a violence that opens up three-point looks. She makes high IQ passes from the post that require a level of basketball processing speed that is genuinely rare at any level of the game. And tonight, in just 10 minutes of floor time, she demonstrated exactly why she is irreplaceable to this franchise.
I'm kind of good with Raven Johnson getting your minutes. Hey, I know. I'm good with Raven Johnson taking over Ty Harris' minutes. Ty Harris 0 for 3 from the field, 0 of 2 from the floor. I don't think Ty Harris brings what Raven Johnson brings to the floor defensively, the tenacity. I just think I would rather Raven Johnson get those backup minutes over Ty Harris. But you know, Stephanie White, experience trumps all.
4 points on the surface, but look deeper. 6 assists in 10 minutes. 6. That is tied for the team lead with Raven Johnson, who played 16 minutes. Assists per minute. Boston was the most impactful passer on the entire team. She was finding the open man before the defense could rotate. She was hitting Caitlin Clark on perfectly timed backdoor cuts. She was threading passes through traffic that required a level of spatial awareness that cannot be coached. It simply exists in her basketball DNA. And the plus-minus? Positive 21 in 10 minutes. Positive 21 in a single 10-minute stretch. That is the single most impactful individual performance of the entire Indiana Fever preseason, and it belonged to a player who only played 10 minutes. The lesson here is simple, and it is enormous. When Aaliyah Boston is on the floor, this team operates at a completely different level. The pick and roll becomes genuinely unregardable. The spacing becomes perfect. The rebounding becomes a strength instead of a liability. The paint defense becomes a fortress. Without her, against Dallas, the team fell apart. With her, even in limited action tonight, the entire system clicked into a gear that the Fever have not shown consistently at any point this preseason. If she is healthy and available for opening night, the Indiana Fever are a dramatically better basketball team than the one that lost to Dallas 5 days ago. And that Dallas loss was already considered a competitive performance, even in defeat. Let us address the Kelsey Mitchell redemption arc, because it matters, and it deserves its full space. 5 days ago in the Dallas loss, Mitchell went 4 for 12 from the field and finished with a -18 plus-minus rating. That is not just a bad game, that is an historically bad performance for a player on a $1.4 million Supermax contract. The internet was not kind. The takes were everywhere. Questions about whether she could be a consistent backcourt partner for Clark, whether the contract extension was premature, whether the chemistry between her and the rest of the roster was actually there or had just looked good in controlled preseason conditions. Basketball pundits were openly skeptical. Fans were openly worried. The discourse around Kelsey Mitchell went from enthusiastic to genuinely concerned in about 48 hours. And tonight, Kelsey Mitchell walked onto the floor and methodically, efficiently, and ruthlessly dismantled every single one of those concerns. 6 for 9 from the field. 3 for 3 from three-point range, 100% shooting from beyond the arc, 17 points, a plus-minus rating of positive 28. 28 in a single game. That is not a bounce-back performance. That is a statement performance. That is the Kelsey Mitchell who averaged over 20 points per game last season. That is the Kelsey Mitchell who made the All-WNBA first team. That is the Kelsey Mitchell who earned that Supermax contract not because of her name recognition, but because of what she demonstrably does on a basketball floor at an elite level. And here is the thing that gets lost when analysts talk about Mitchell in isolation. Her value is not just about the points she scores. Her value is about what happens to a defense when both she and Caitlin Clark are on the floor simultaneously. Clark's gravity, her historic ability to pull defensive attention toward her by virtue of being the most credible three-point threat in the league, is unprecedented in women's basketball. Defenses cannot ignore her. They have to commit extra attention to her. They have to send help. They have to rotate. And when they do that, somebody is open. And that somebody, more often than not, needs to be an elite shooter who can punish the defense for its overcommitment.
Shots, I think you're unplayable. I still think you are just unplayable defensively. But Damaris Dantas did have a good game. She knocked down shots. She had 16 points on 5 of 9, shooting 4 of 6 from 3, 5 rebounds, 3 assists in 23 minutes. So it's good to see Dantas getting in a rhythm, seeing some shots go in, getting that confidence going, because that is going to be something that the Indiana Fever need going forward. Now, Raven Johnson, who I feel like should be playing over Ty Harris, she had 9.7 rebounds.
Kelsey Mitchell, at her best, is exactly that player. She catches on the wing, and her release is so fast that even if the defense scrambles back, it is too late. Clark drives and kicks. Mitchell catches and fires. The ball is through the net before the help defense can arrive. Clark warps the entire structure of the defense from 30 feet away, and Mitchell scores in the vacuum that warping creates. When both of them are operating at 60% from the field in the same game, as they were tonight, there is not a defensive scheme in the entire WNBA that can stop the Indiana Fever offense. You cannot guard both of them without leaving someone else dangerously open. And when the someone else open is Aaliyah Boston posting up in the paint, or Sophie Cunningham setting up in the corner, or Raven Johnson running the baseline, the defense simply has no good answer. That backcourt combination is genuinely unguardable at its ceiling. Tonight was a glimpse of that ceiling, and it should have every team on the Fever's opening month schedule deeply concerned. Now, let us spend some real time on Raven Johnson, because her story might be the most fascinating subplot of this entire preseason, and it requires some context to fully appreciate. When the Indiana Fever selected Raven Johnson in the WNBA draft, the reaction from a significant portion of the fan base was not enthusiastic. There were questions. There were concerns. The discourse online was pointed and sometimes harsh. Some fans felt the pick was a mistake. Some felt she would disrupt the team's chemistry. Some simply wanted the Fever to take someone else. The internet had largely made up its mind before she played a single professional minute. 3 preseason games later, Raven Johnson has accumulated 18 points, 18 assists, and 12 rebounds. She is averaging 6 assists per game coming off the bench as a rookie, 6 assists per game as a reserve guard. In the preseason, yes, but the numbers and the film tell a consistent story across 3 different games against 3 different opponents. Tonight specifically, 9 points on 3 for 6 shooting, 7 assists, 6 rebounds, 16 minutes of floor time, positive 3 plus minus. The efficiency was real. The vision was real. The defensive intensity, which might actually be her most underrated attribute, was absolutely real. Her perimeter defense is not just competent. It is elite by professional standards. The way she pressures the ball handler, the way she fights through screens, the way she anticipates passing lanes and gets her hands active, these are not traits you can develop in a summer. These are traits that exist in a player's DNA and get refined through coaching and repetition. Johnson has the DNA. Stephanie White is providing the coaching. The repetition is happening every single game. Her chemistry with the veterans is visibly growing. And perhaps most importantly, for a young player coming off the bench into a system built around a generational superstar, she understands and accepts her role. She is not trying to be Caitlin Clark. She is not trying to be the focal point. She is trying to be the player who makes the team better when Clark is resting, who defends at an elite level, who makes smart decisions with the ball, and who earns trust one possession at a time. That willingness to embrace a defined role and execute it with consistency and intelligence is exactly what winning teams are built from. And Raven Johnson is quietly becoming one of the most valuable pieces on this Indiana Fever roster. Let us walk through the rest of the box score because the depth story tonight was genuinely remarkable across the board, and it deserves to be documented. Michaela Onyenwere, or Timson as she has been referred to in some coverage, continues to be perhaps the most pleasant surprise of the entire preseason. Tonight she went 5 for 5 from the field for 12 points and finished with a plus 36 rating. 5 for 5. Not missing a single shot she attempted. And this was not the first time. Over the last 2 preseason games, she has gone 8 for 9 from the field. 8 for 9. That is an 89% shooting percentage sustained over 2 games. She is not just getting easy looks. She is moving off the ball intelligently, using screens effectively, and making quick decisions when she catches in rhythm. She is actively building a case for meaningful regular season minutes, and Stephanie White is going to have an interesting depth chart decision to make when the games actually count. Dira Stantis broke out in a big way, scoring 16 points on 4 for 6 three-point shooting. The significance of this extends beyond the numbers. The Indiana Fever's front court has historically been a place where floor spacing was an afterthought. Big players who could rebound and defend, but who pulled defenders toward the paint rather than stretching them away from it. Dantas, showing the ability to knock down corner threes and movement threes from the front court position, gives White a weapon she has not always had. A big who can space the floor and create room for Clark and Mitchell to operate in the paint. That is a genuinely useful tool. Monique Billings was perfect in limited minutes, 3 for 3, 7 points. Sophie Cunningham brought the energy and enforcer mentality that has always defined her game. 8 points on 75% shooting and a positive 34 rating. Cunningham's value on this team is not always captured in the box score, but her physicality, her willingness to set hard screens, and her corner three-point shooting make her a valuable rotation piece in the right matchups. And the truly remarkable thing about tonight's victory, every single player who stepped on the court posted a positive plus-minus rating except Kiana Williams at a minor -2. Every player in a 48-point blowout. That kind of comprehensive contribution across an entire 12-player rotation does not happen by accident. It happens when a coaching staff has installed a system, built a culture, and assembled a roster that genuinely understands and embraces its collective identity. Here is the preseason arc in summary, because it is important to understand where this team started and where it is now before we talk about what comes next. Game 1 against the New York Liberty. Caitlin Clark was visibly rusty, shooting 2 for 10 from the field. The team won 109-91, carried largely by bench depth and defensive intensity. The result was a win, but the performance raised questions about Clark's timing and the team's offensive ceiling without her operating at full capacity. Game 2 against Dallas. Clark exploded for 21 points and looked dramatically sharper. But the Fever lost 95-80 because the moment she rested, the bench collapsed completely, and Dallas outscored Indiana 36-7 in a single catastrophic quarter. Game 3 against Nigeria. Clark was efficient and joyful. Aaliyah Boston returned and immediately transformed the team's structural integrity. Mitchell bounced back with the best performance of her preseason. Johnson continued her quiet revolution. The bench was dominant. The team won 105-57 and covered every single defensive assignment from tip to final buzzer. The trajectory is not ambiguous. This team got meaningfully better in every single measurable dimension across 3 preseason games. Clark got healthier and more comfortable. The supporting cast got more cohesive. The bench got more confident. And the overall team identity, which Stephanie White has been building patiently through the chaos of injuries, load management, and the inherent messiness of preseason basketball, is starting to crystallize into something genuinely fearsome. So what does this all mean heading into May 9th? What does it mean for opening night against the Dallas Wings on national television on ABC? Here is Simply Explains Red, and we are not going to hedge it. This Indiana Fever team, at full health and operating at the level we saw tonight, not against Nigeria, but the level of performance and cohesion we saw, is one of the 3 or 4 most dangerous teams in the WNBA heading into the 2025 regular season. Let me be careful about that claim, because I want to be precise. Preseason performance against limited competition does not directly translate to regular season success. The Liberty, the Aces, the Lynx, and a handful of other franchises are going to provide tests that Nigeria could not possibly replicate. The competition gets exponentially harder when the games count. The scouting becomes more sophisticated. The defensive game planning becomes more specific and more targeted. But here is what the preseason has told us, beyond any reasonable doubt. First, Caitlin Clark's offseason work on her shooting mechanics with Brandon Payne was not just successful in a controlled gym setting, it is showing up in live action against professional defenders. That is the hardest translation to make in basketball. Shooting 70% in practice means almost nothing. Shooting 57% from three in competitive games means everything. Second, Aaliyah Boston is not just a complementary piece to this team. She is a structural necessity. The Fever without Boston are a good team that can compete, but can be exploited. The Fever with Boston are a genuinely complete team with no obvious, gaping weakness that a well-prepared opponent can systematically attack. The difference between those two versions of this franchise is a legitimate championship contender versus a second-round exit. Third, the depth is real. Not Dallas preseason depth, where everything fell apart, but tonight depth, where the bench actually extended leads and maintained defensive intensity. Megan McConnell, Satori Walker-Kimbrough, Michaela Onyenware, Darius Dantas. These are real contributors who can hold the floor without catastrophically damaging the team's performance. That matters enormously over the course of an 80-plus game season. Fourth, and this is perhaps the most important point of everything we have discussed tonight, Raven Johnson is not a problem. She is an asset. And the fact that she is an asset as a rookie coming off the bench, playing the exact role that the team needs her to play, without ego and without dysfunction, is a testament both to her character and to Stephanie White's ability to build a locker room where everyone understands and embraces their purpose. 7 days from now, the Dallas Wings are going to walk into Gainbridge Fieldhouse and face an Indiana Fever team that is angrier, healthier, more cohesive, and more motivated than any version of this franchise that Dallas has faced in the last 2 years. They are going to face an Iowa Caitlin who spent the entire offseason rebuilding her shot, who has spent 3 preseason games burning off rust and rediscovering her freedom on the basketball floor, and who looked tonight for the first time since she was wearing black and gold in Iowa City, like a player who is not thinking at all. Just playing. Just feeling it. Just doing the impossible things that make her impossible to stop. They are going to face a Mitchell-Clark backcourt that, when both players are locked in simultaneously, does not have an answer in the current WNBA defensive playbook. They are going to face an Aaliyah Boston, who anchors everything: the pick and roll, the rebounding, the paint defense, the high IQ passing out of the post, and makes the entire offensive structure work the way it was designed to work. And they are going to face a Stephanie White coaching staff that has been quietly, methodically, patiently building toward this exact moment all preseason long. The WNBA's 30th season is about to begin. The Indiana Fever are about to walk onto a national television stage on ABC on opening night with the most electricity, the most momentum, and the most terrifying collection of offensive talent they have assembled in franchise history. Iowa Caitlin is back. Aaliyah Boston is healthy. Kelsey Mitchell is locked in. Raven Johnson is proving the doubters wrong 1 game at a time. Sophie Cunningham is enforcing the paint. Michaela Onyenware is emerging as a legitimate contributor. The depth is deeper than it appeared 2 weeks ago. This team is ready. And the WNBA, with 7 days and counting, is not prepared for what is about to come out of Indianapolis. Opening night, Dallas Wings, ABC, May 9th. Here at Simply Explained, we will be covering every angle, every rotation, every lineup decision, every statistic, and every story that the mainstream media either misses or does not take the time to understand, because that is what we do. We find what is actually happening beneath the surface, and we break it down until it is completely, unmistakably clear. If you want to understand the Indiana Fever, really understand them, not just watch the highlights, then this is the channel for you. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop your opening night prediction in the comments below. I want to see every single take you have got. The games count in 7 days, and we are ready.